bigger, lesser, and New York State presenters and talking amongst our own team and those that we kept coming in contact with, it's clear that just getting together is important. So that's what we're here to do. So I just want to stress, although we've gathered some experts to help us have a productive conversation, it's not a webinar. So I don't want you to picture our panelists on stage at a conference or on a dais, but just think about us all in your favorite coffee shop having a chat, because that's really what we're here to do and what we're going for. And we know in the last one, we and the panelists learned as much from the group as probably the group learned from the panelists. So we were taking these topics from things we hear from our colleagues. And after the last one, it became quite clear that we all want to talk about the funding landscape for the arts and understanding what that's going to look like in a time of social distancing. So, so we've gathered the three folks that Ian mentioned, and I would start just by inviting them to introduce themselves. So I'm going to start with Steve Butler.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me. Ian did such a great job with my bio. There's not much more to add except that I'm co-president of Arts New York State, which is a fledgling statewide arts advocacy organization working with the arts councils and decentralization grant sites across the state to advocate for the arts. And I run a regional arts council. It's 6 counties, 5,500 square miles. I think geographically it's quite large and very rural with a lot of post-industrial small urban cities scattered throughout.
Thank you, Steve. And next we have Jen Soloway from ArtsWestchester.
Hi, everybody. Jen Soloway. I am the Director of Administration for ArtsWestchester. I oversee the all of the finances and HR, the building. I help with some of the capital grant writing. And yeah, I look forward to hearing from all of you.
And last but not least is Haowen Wang from Mid-Atlantic Arts.
Thanks, Seth. Haowen Wang here. As I was introduced, I'm the program officer at the Mid-Atlantic Arts Foundation. We're, as some of you may know, we're a regional arts organization. We cover our service area for most of our program covers the 9 states and territory region. We roughly call the Mid-Atlantic. I'm the program officer there. I've been there for almost 4 years now, and I manage some of our regional touring programs. Before that, I worked for about 12 years in New York City for various service-based art service organizations. So it's a pleasure to be invited. Thank you.
Great, thank you all. So when we prepped for this, we thought a good place to start was to sort of just set the stage in terms of the lay of the land for funding at the state level. We found out through the conversation that Jen has worked a lot on PPE loans and had some interesting points on the nature of diminished sales tax and those effects. And Steve has a great grasp of the state budget and sort of the unfortunate, unpredictable nature of the state finances. So I think if we want to set the stage with some conversation about that from either of you, that's probably a great place to start.
Jen, you want to?
Sure, yeah, I'll start. So on our end, we were able to secure our payroll protection loan. I'm not sure if everyone here is familiar with that or has been able to secure that for your organization. There's new regulations about the forgiveness coming out kind of every day. So I don't know about you guys, but I've been on webinars multiple times a week just trying to keep up with the rules and regulations. Also, successes on our end, and hopefully other people have had successes that they can share. Our corporate funders have been very helpful about getting their pledges and contributions in earlier in the year. And we've also had success. There's been a couple of our corporations that have come out with COVID specific related grants that we have had access to. So I encourage you to reach out to your corporate funders if you haven't already to see if they can at least help you with the cash flow to get their contributions in sooner rather than later. On the state funding side, we have been having conversations about the results of what happens with the lack of sales tax. People aren't purchasing gas, and we are anticipating seeing a trickle-down effect from those aspects. Steve, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jen. Well, just to set the stage a little bit, I want to, quote from the Bureau of Economic Analysis, the U.S. Bureau, that New York State has a $114 billion industry. That was as of 2018 for the arts. And we employ over 460,000 people. And of the 760 billion across the nation, New York State accounts for 15% of the arts industry's productivity. We're second amongst all the states in terms of what the arts does for the economy. And in the state, we account, our value is greater than that of retail, construction, or transportation. Now let's talk about state funding. The New York State Council on the Arts, which is the primary arts funder, peaked in the early 1990s at about $54 million for local assistance. Last year it had $41 million. And that's 26 years later. With a simple inflation multiplier, that agency should really be at 104 million just to have kept pace with inflation. And instead, we're actually less than we were in the early 1990s. And that's also true at the NEA, the National Endowment for the Arts. They've been pretty static for years. So as an industry, we all here have done very well of reaching out and building other relationships to continue to present, produce, create, serve. We should be applauded. But now the state is grappling with a possibly $15 billion deficit. And in a conversation amongst a number of statewide not-for-profits, there's a thought that there will be an immediate 10% cut across the board without really looking of agencies, without any kind of nuance to that. And as we know from the recession, as receipts slow, to Jen's point, payments get delayed, contracts are not renewed, and in 2009, what happened was contracts were reneged upon. So there were promises made, agencies moved forward only to find out that the funding would not be coming. And to that point, I don't think a lot of arts agencies ever really recovered from the recession. They're more hollowed out. So we have quite a hard road ahead of us. And I would only say that I think it's time that we work together to get off this merry-go-round, and that we partner with the other not-for-profit sectors who are going through similar things. Because what this does is, as you defund us and we don't have payroll and are not infusing our dollars into the local economy, then it's the effect is quite dramatic in terms of that economy. Other people are put out of work, et cetera, et cetera. And when we return to the new normal, our industry is decimated and we're not there to help build the community or the economy. So I'm hoping today that there's some new ideas about how we can end this continuous cycle that we've been in for at least 25 years and come up with something new and exciting.
Thank you very much, Steve. So Steve, I just want to note that there's a request in the chat if you could share some of these statistics via email. So if you don't mind, if you sent them to Ian, we could send them to the group afterwards.
Okay, absolutely.
So the way we're going to continue to, I have some more prepped questions, but, we really want to open it up as soon as possible. So I can certainly move on to another prepped question to continue to try to spark the conversation. But if anybody has a question, we can certainly take your questions right now. So I'm looking in the chat. So, Steve, there's a question in the chat about asking what kind of partnerships you're thinking of in other nonprofit sectors or perhaps something else.
Jen commented, and I think my colleagues probably have a lot to say about this because one is a funder and Jen's talked about working with corporations. I was actually talking about working with other not-for-profits because I think if you add up all the not-for-profit sectors, we're probably one of the, I think, and I don't have the exact statistics, but I think we're probably one of the largest employers in terms of that category of employment across the state of New York. But because we're in these silo systems and end up competing a little bit with each other between health and human services, but when you look at things holistically, people need emotional support as much as they need food to really thrive. But if we could work together and make a case, about our value and that we should be perhaps, instead of sending us all to the unemployment lines, pay us to stay open and keep doing the work that we do, like some places in Europe are, I think that would be an interesting partnership.
Thanks, Steve. So we have a question from Michelle Connelly. And Michelle, it looks like you're unmuted, so I'm going to give you the floor.
Okay, great. Thanks, Seth. Hi, this is Michelle with the Earlville Opera House. And Steve, thanks so much for that detailed information. Really appreciate that. My last research into the New York State budget showed NISCA remaining almost flat as level as last year at 46.9 mil, with the majority, 90% of that going out to the field. The field did get a $100,000 cut, but in the overall bucket, it looked like we were going to be receiving as a field about $42.5 million, with NISCA keeping just about $4.5 million for their administrative ties. I'm wondering, New York does recognize the importance of the arts, although NISCA is the smallest, tiniest agency we have. I'm wondering, when do we think that the budget will be re-looked at for this maybe possible across the board 10% cut? And do we think that if we started an advocacy initiative now, we could impact that in this renegotiation of the budget while it's occurring, or is that too soon?
That has begun. Arts New York State used Voter Voice to send together about 1,000 signatures from arts agencies and send it to the governor. This is just a projection based on history that the not-for-profits were looking at. And there's also concern about the merging of agencies. And when you're, as you point out, Michelle, such a small agency, that's always a threat to our field, that agency somehow gets.
One good thing, Steve, that I did see, which was a note in the, it was actually an executive note in the fiscal year 21 budget for NISCA, had that they needed to retain 30 full-time employees. So, with some people retiring, like Robert Barron and, the theater department head, I'm wondering how they're going to maintain that full-time employee at 30 people if they do consolidate their own departments. But I guess that's for NISCA. But my question to you is, yes, I believe I did sign the petition. I'd like to know how I can become more active with your group, because the statistics you present are just overwhelming. And it's unfortunate that, people go by the intrinsic value of the arts and do not look at them as an economic driver, which they really are. So maybe on the side, I can get with you about how to become more involved in that movement.
Sure.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that question. I'm having a little bit of a stuck screen thing, but don't want to back out and lose everyone. So, but it looks like there are no other questions from the group at this point. So I'll move on to the next thing from our notes, which was to invite Haowen into the conversation. When we were prepping, Haowen, you gave us the viewpoint that we hoped for when we invited you, which was that of the touring grant providers, and you laid out some of the challenges and questions around the future of your touring grants and what that might mean, given that we're all quite uncertain about future seasons and gatherings and touring for artists and all of those things. So I'd love for you to just give us a little bit of the lay of the land from your perspective.
Sure. Thank you, Seth. Can everyone hear? Great. From, in terms of our regional touring programs, the funds that we provide to support presenters, nonprofit organizations that does presenting in our region, those, as you may know, mostly comes from the National Endowment for the Arts. So for now, we can say that our the coming year, FY22, is fairly secure. So we don't see fluctuations on that front, unless, of course, our president, as he has been doing, recommending zeroing out the endowment, and that if that is successful, then that changes the story. But that hasn't been the case, and if that continues not be the case, we don't see changes to our programs and the amount of funding available in the near future. I can say that for the coming year. The challenge really is we are about to announce the FY21 grantees that's coming. That we've been working on and getting ready. Now the challenge really is this year how, and you guys probably know this better than I do, how will this year shake out to look like? So we've been working with our FY20 grantees and presenters to have a very lenient sort of postponement and cancellation policies. Folks that cancel can keep some of their grants for certain line items such as artist fees and other things that they had to cover due to cancellation. This is directly coming from an OMB policy that allows us to do that. If we're now, and then we've given if presenters in FY20, this current fiscal year, if they decide to postpone, they can postpone until the end of FY21. So that's for 20. Now, what we're trying to do is figure out what we can do for our FY21 grantee who are just about to be announced, and we don't know where the OMB stands in terms of extending that policy to keep the federal funds if projects are canceled due to challenges of COVID-19. If not, we may not. If they don't extend that policy deadline, then we may not be able to do that. So we're at this moment we're trying to figure that out. But of course, the rule of thumb is try within the limitations given to us by our funders, try to be as lenient as possible and flexible as possible. That's sort of the idea. In some of the conversations I've had, really, I want to also talk a little bit. Well, let me first talk about the CARES Act. So you all know that the Congress has approved a $2.3 trillion program. Yeah, $2.3 trillion program for the CARES Act, and the National Endowment for the Arts has been allocated 75 million of that, right? And then 40% of that will be provided directly through the NEA to the New York to the state's arts agency, as well as the regional arts agencies, such as regional arts organizations such as the Mid-Atlantic Arts Foundation. So 40% of 75 million, that's roughly $30 million. So we're talking about on average, less than $1 million per agency. We're sort of on the later end of the spectrum. We're about to announce the Mid-Atlantic Arts Foundation's CARES Act program next week. But so from some of our colleagues in the other regional arts organizations, we've been hearing that the demand is just crushing. Many of them had to close their deadlines before their they had to close the application before their announced deadline because they just simply reached capacity of where they can handle the amount in terms of the amount amount of proposals received. So we're struggling with that. We have also less than $1 million to offer as part of this program. We can see this very easily go to one single state or even a single region within the state. So how do we do that in a 9-state jurisdiction region is a challenge. So we're trying to figure out ways to in our back end to provide a more or less equitable structures that the funds goes out to different size organizations in different regions within our state. But our recommendation to you is for you that runs arts organization, nonprofit organizations to sign up to our mailing list, and then once that gets announced, immediately apply. What we try to do is keep that proposal very simple. If there's going to be one narrative question and an expense section where you tell us exactly where that money you intend to go, cover your artistic director salary, for example. But don't wait on that. Act immediately because we can just see this is gonna close. The capacity is gonna be very run out very quickly. So the other thing is, the CARES Act. The 75 million CARES Act money was an effort of advocacy, right? That it wasn't initially intended to have the 75 million earmarked towards for the arts sector, but it has, although it was nowhere near enough to the need of our sector, obviously. What I hear is that this is relief, and then there will be a package for recovery, right? So we need to be ready to say, no, the arts needs to be part of this, and we need a bigger part of the kind of the pie, which is really important because on the surface level you read 75 million, you're like yes, but actually it's just such tiny portion of our sector. Seth, does that cover?
Yeah, no, that's great, Haowen. Thank you very much. I think that's very complete and helpful. So again, looks like Michelle Connelly has a question, so I'm going to give Michelle the floor.
Hi again. Sorry to be dominating things here, but things just spark in my mind and everything is like a rabbit hole. You ask a question, you get another question. We were successful in getting the PPP funding and the EDIL, which was directly from the SPA. Now, we've also, as I'm sure most people on this, have gone for the NISCA NEA, funding that was due on May 26th. And I see that, thank goodness, New York Forward has a fund for people who were not able to receive funding through those programs because of the limitations, and it ran out so quickly, which unfortunately people like ourselves who have already received that are not eligible for the New York Forward Fund, which our funding for the PPP and EDIL is going to run out mid-June. And of course it did help, through the immediate disaster relief situation with our, overhead. But when this runs out, we're on our own. So, my fingers are crossed, for the NISCA NEA grant. And our area, we do not have industry that can support the arts with any really type of resources. We're very, very rural. I've been told by most of our local foundations who have been our saviors in the past during different tragedies that, human service needs, of course, come first at this time, and to, not expect to be able to receive, pots of funding as we have, because they've had to donate big chunks to the United Way or to this or to that. I guess, hopefully there will be, like, we were talking about the recovery round. My question is, does anybody know what the status is of the latest, I think it's the HEROES Act that's being negotiated. Does anybody know the status of that? The federal next package is called the HEROES Act. I guess they started working on it a few weeks ago. They have been talking about it. It did pass the House. It went to the Senate. It was being negotiated because they didn't want to give money to the states for this, that, whatever. But that also, I believe, had more funding in it for nonprofit organizations. I just haven't heard anything about it recently. So anybody know any future plans for the federal government to provide more money for us?
I don't, but my boss, this is Haowen, my boss might have some scoop of the circles that she's in. I can check with her. And if there's something I can share, I'll share it with Seth.
Thank you.
The little bit that I've heard from, mostly the conversation with Americans for the Arts is nothing's really resolved. As you may know, there's sort of three things going on. One is there's a thought that the economy should just reopen and things will get better. Another is, I think at the Senate, they've been talking about a liability, a blanket coverage for liability for all businesses. That's what they're sort of focused on. And then you have the Congress's HEROES Act. And I don't know that negotiations have knitted together to very far. And that's what we're all kind of waiting for. And I know that in the state budget, there were 4 periods when the governor could go in and look at the budget and make reallocations. One of those was May 15th. So we all kind of held our breath and nothing happened. And I think everybody is waiting to see what is going to happen at the federal level, because so much will be determined from whatever comes together or doesn't come together around that. And of course, our Senator Chuck Schumer is, leading the effort for HEROES at the Senate side. And we're all kind of waiting.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, Steve. I feel like a game show host, but if we don't have any questions from the studio audience, Ian, maybe we'll go to one of your poll questions.
Can I just say something?
Yeah, please.
Real quick? This reminded me of how and what you were talking about when we first were setting this up, how inspiring it is to see so many artists and arts organizations sort of pivoting their programming to move online and be creative. And what we're realizing in the county is that we're all aware of what we're doing, but the government is focused on phase 1 and phase 2 of reopening, that they're not really tuned in to how hard everyone's working and what we're doing and still providing for the community. So, and because the arts organizations are phase 4, I really think there is a focus of the focus is not on the arts right now for the powers that be. So I want to reiterate the advocacy efforts and reminding your legislators and Congress folks that you are doing stuff and still working. And even though the doors are closed, we're still doing all this amazing work online and doing whatever we can to prepare for our reopening.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we're starting to get some things in the chat, which is great. So I'm going to start with and I'm sorry it doesn't give me the name, but Delaware Valley Arts Alliance.
Thanks, Seth. This is Ariel Shanborg. I'm the executive director at DBAA. And I just wanted to kind of piggyback on the advocacy that Steve was talking about and the comments that just got made by Jen, that one of the things that we're seeing is each of our counties and our regions perhaps are creating reopening and restructuring committees. And it's different industries and different community heads. And I think one of the things that each of us in our counties and regions need to do is make sure that the arts are at those tables. So as we saw in Sullivan County, almost the entire plans in progress division got furloughed. our county had to furlough 77 employees, and one of the departments that took the biggest hit was the one agency that was working closest with the arts community. So we kind of lost a number of our advocates at the table, and what we've been doing is really advocating for having a seat at that table. So as they talk about reopening our region, as they talk about reopening the economy, they're not just talking to a casino and a water park, but that they're talking to the small businesses that are represented by many of our organizations. That's it.
Thank you, Ariel. And then there's a comment here from Kerby that I want to touch about the shared work program, because selfishly, I don't know anything about that.
I will try to tell you about it. I am very fortunate to have a treasurer on our board of directors who's done a tremendous amount of work. He did the PPP application for us, and he is now researching this. But from what I understand, it's through New York State unemployment, and it would require a business, it's not specifically arts oriented, but it would require a business to cut back on the weekly hours of their employees, and depending on the percentage of hours that you cut back, unemployment would cover some of that loss of their pay. That's at least the way I understand it. You can, cut back to 20%, 40%, or 60%, and they would cover what that percentage of what you would get if that person was on unemployment. So I think it's, again, I'm not an expert on this, but I think it's something that you might, all of you might look into. You have to have at least 2 employees, 2 participants to qualify. But again, it's not specifically for the arts, but it is something that we're applying for to keep we have 4 full-time, 3 full-time, 1 part-time, and 1 on an hourly basis that we're trying to keep through the summer. And that's what we're going to try to do with that.
Thanks very much. Of course, now the questions and comments are flying in, so I'm going to go as quickly as we can to respect time. But I will just say now, in terms of housekeeping, anything like what Kerby's just suggested, or any practical links for advocacy or funding, please do send them to Ian and I, and we'll send them all out to the group so that we can all share these resources. So I want to give the floor to Vanessa, who has a comment about positioning marketing as a group effort, because we talked a lot about this when we prepped. How can we advocate as a group? So Vanessa, would love to hear what you're thinking.
Good morning. I'm with a community performance series, which is similar to the way SUNY Purchase has their PAC. We're smaller, much smaller, only 3 staff total, but we're in residence at SUNY Potsdam, so a college community partnership. We are SUNY employees, but the organization reimburses the salaries, so that's how we function, and we're somewhat insulated because of that. We are largely endowment, have a lot of endowments, and we're fortunate for that. However, our marketing budget is slim, like all of yours, I'm sure. We've had to drop pretty much all of our marketing when everything was canceled. So, the shared or the collaborating point just kind of sparked an idea that, I don't know if there's a grant program or any kind of funding agency that could help fund a performing arts video PSA. When you're talking about appealing to fundraising, it's a very emotional point. So for example, if you had a core video that maybe interviewed several performing arts organizations across the state, and talked about their value and talked about what it means for people to experience the performing arts in person, the work that's been done remotely to uplift people during this time and what it means for people. And then the ability for each organization to then add in their own B-rolls or add in their own branding and be able to deploy that as a group effort. Sometimes that can be really powerful. Or posing a question to attendees, what does the performing arts mean to you? What is their most memorable performance? And then they can record themselves. We can stitch those things together and push it out. That's a much less expensive undertaking as a group than individually. Videography is not cheap. So.
Thank you, Vanessa. And I think that's a great spark for, something we can build off of. And I'll keep my engagement and marketing team off the screen so they don't shudder when I pile on more work. But, we've at Purchase have certainly had some good luck just producing content within this environment. I think it's readily doable. And if you want to write to me and maybe we have an offline and then come back to the group and see who wants to participate, I think that's something we can talk about getting done. Okay, so I have Joshua Kane was going to go next.
I just wanted to bring up the subject that it's very important that we start focusing now on the stories that we want to create and put out there about the arts and the relevance and importance of the arts. We're about to be hitting the window where the floodgates for all the political stories are going to be eating up the bandwidth, and the discussions have already started again on, do you want an art center or do you want a fire department, as far as where funding is going. And I wanted to suggest that one of the things that we focus on in our evangelicizing for the arts is creating the stories that show more about the impact and effect of the arts themselves, more than the arts and the artists themselves. For example, a video of a ballet company rehearsing and performing will not be as impactful in my belief system as a child in an audience watching ballet dancers, leaning over, whispering to the mom, I want lessons. The next shot in the studio, the child taking lessons, going through the struggles, and then leading to that child performing with a company on one of our stages. And then also showing the master classes taking place with the professional companies. But this is the time where we need to re-energize amateur participation in the arts. Where we need to get people back to playing instruments on their front porches, not just the artists who are not able to go on the stages, but people who used to have music classes as part of regular school. This is the time where we need to seize the opportunity to expand beyond what was given in the past 20 years to what it was back in the 1950s as far as appreciation for the arts, during the period when art centers were themselves being thought of as an idea to be created. So rather than seeing this as an opportunity just to reach back to try to grab back the paltry chicken feed which had been thrown down before, I think this is the time to open up the discussion much further, increase the bandwidth, and amplify any dialogue about where art has resonated in the lives of the community, and to get the community's voices on tape, in writing, in pieces of art, to use this as a chance to clamor for small videos from people about their experiences at the art centers, to build the war chest, so to speak, so that when we have to go to the government, go to legislative meetings, we're able to run 3-minute videos of pre-harvested prime quotes and material so that we have it already in hand before the panic hits. So this is the time when we are not on stage, where we need to be rallying those who are already fan base of what we do into giving their commitment, into giving their words, into giving their faces, whether it's holding up their iPhone and making a video or doing it via Zoom. We can interview people, we can collect. So I want us to think about the group narratives that we can create, because if we go after this individually, none of us is going to be strong enough to cut into the bandwidth and grab the attention right now. But if we work collectively to gather and share the material and create 3 to 5 pinpointed spots that we can leverage as a greater arts community in New York State, I think we might be able to affect some change.
Thanks, Josh. I think that's that's well said and well appreciated. And if we can form a group to start to work on this thing, I will certainly lean on you to voice it.
I'm gonna just share a teeny tiny little story. I think it builds on that. Thank you for reiterating, and expanding on the concept of working together on marketing and collective voice. But there's I don't know if anyone else saw it, but there's a very moving video of a cellist playing in the rain in Italy in his doorstep. And my 7-year-old daughter watched it. Watching her face and watching her respond to that type of thing was one of the most moving experiences. And so I think it's I think that people take for granted something until it's gone, right? And I think that audiences in general, people in general, were gravitated towards the arts, and they used it as a salve during this time. And I think we need to tap into that. It's like, oh, this means so much to me. I can't lose this. People really clamored for it, and it was a way for people to collectively connect and heal. And so that could be part of the story.
Thank you very much. These are all such important things now more than ever. And yeah, couldn't say that better. They'll miss it when it's gone. So let's get on it. So I want to be respectful of time. It is 11:30. I don't necessarily need to cut us off, but at least wind up the formal part of this. I want to thank Haowen, who had to run to another meeting right at 11:30. And I also want to put in, for our part, anyone on the call who's part of the SUNY system, we have started to meet as all SUNY Performing Arts Centers every other week to just, again, continue the collaboration. So if you're part of the SUNY system and you're not on that call for some reason, do drop me a line and we'll get you into that. And I also would advocate for anyone who's not SUNY, but maybe there's some other common thread to start to meet in that way, because there's definitely power in the numbers. I want to thank Steve and Jen as well, and just close by asking them for any final thoughts on advocacy in particular, how we can band together on the state level.
I also want to remind the powers that be of the economic impact that the arts have on the economy. So as the economy starts to reopen, I know in Westchester we have, I don't remember off the top of my head what our statistics are, but we do generate a lot of dollars to put back into the economy. So I think having those statistics as part of this combined advocacy effort would be great.
If I may say something real quick, I think I'm not alone to say that the nonprofit arts model is one that is severely flawed, to say the least, and in that also funders. As a funder, I know that funders can't create the future, right? At its best, it catches up to what's happening eventually, if that. So that this really is we as a field really need to start requesting some of the things that we've been asking for years, right? More operating support, direct support for artists. Unrestricted funds, right? Timing projects that last longer than the fiscal year. Things like that. I think we really that people like me that sits in sort of the administrative bureaucracy can do some, but can't alone change the system, right? But this is the time where. Because the structure we're realizing it's a house of cards. So we really need to push forward and see what we need is really what we need. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Haowen, and I'm glad you got your closing statement in. I thought you had left us. So, Steve, that leaves you.
Well, I just want this great conversation, everybody, and again, thanks for having me. And Seth and Ian, thank you so much for putting this together. I just want to kind of weave a couple things together. Joshua, I'm glad this is being recorded. I think we should just put your video out and send it out to the legislators, frankly. I want to touch a little bit on what Ariel said, that all politics being local, it's like, why are we not on the reopening teams when every downtown has arts and entertainment? I mean, why else do people come downtown after 5 o'clock? And then let's think about in our regions, talking to people like, is there a time that we could reopen together? Like, because frankly, people are nervous about coming back. So we have another story that we have to sell, which is that we're safe, we've got plans in place, and that's going to be a big part of the marketing campaign, Vanessa. And it would be great if we could work together and, as you say, not try to, get the jump on somebody else in a coordinated effort of like, we're reopening and we have safety and we're all in unison, and encouraging people to come back into our venues. We were first closed. We're going to be last reopened. Our industry is really imperiled at this moment. Now is the time to come together.
Great. Thank you, Steve and Jen and Haowen, and really everyone. This is all so useful and inspiring. So we're going to say goodbye now. It's been a pleasure having coffee with everyone. Please write to us if something sparked, and we'll just, we have the list, so we'll spread it out to the group. And we'll announce another one of these really soon. And if you have a topic that you want to discuss or panelists you want to recommend, please do let us know. All right. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.